Well, greetings, everybody. It's nice to see you all here today. This is, again, your favorite speaker, Dr. Ronald J. Brown. Our topic for today is going to be Stonehenge, the Mystery Temple of England. So, let's get started. Once again, there's a picture of me when I visited Stonehenge. You can see it was in the summer. And you can see really that there's nothing around it. It is just a big open plain. And in fact, many of them are farm fields. So you have to walk quite a distance from the visitor center to actually access the area. But it is well worth the visit. Our outline: mysterious ruins of the earth, lost cities of the world, such as Angkor Wat, Machu Picchu. In fact, I just got back from Zimbabwe, where I visited the ancient lost city of Great Zimbabwe. Well, why is Stonehenge so important? Well, stone buildings are one of the accomplishments of what we would call high civilizations. Why was Stonehenge built? We really don't know. Theories abound. The new Druid movement in Northern Europe has adopted Stonehenge as one of its more popular places to visit, and even religious site. And then Stonehenge in popular culture. So let's get going. Mystery ruins of the planet Earth. Well, there's me crawling up, back when you could, the Pyramid of Egypt. Visited the Nazca Lines, Machu Picchu. I've always been fascinated by these ancient lost cities because when you visit them, like Machu Picchu on the right, you sort of wonder, why were they built? What was its goal? What was the civilization? We don't have any written records. And so it allows the mind to literally go crazy. There's me in the upper left visiting Lalibela in Ethiopia, the sculpted churches carved out of the mountain. Although that's me in my early 20s in Jerusalem, the pyramids of Mexico, Angkor Wat. I've always been fascinated by these ancient, wonderful places. Well, on my list was Great Zimbabwe, which I just visited a couple of months ago. Babylon, city of Ur, is another place I hope to visit. And then the recently discovered lost city of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Again, a mysterious city that was equally mysteriously abandoned. And then the mysteries of Easter Island, another trip which I will have to schedule in the near future. Now, when we talk about civilizations, one of the attributes, one of the defining characteristics of what we would call a civilization would be stone buildings. The Egyptians, of course, built temples, they built the pyramids. Attila the Hun didn't leave behind a great civilization, didn't leave behind anything written, didn't leave behind much other than the Huns, but they didn't build stone buildings. Abraham came out of ancient Babylon, migrated, wandered around the Middle East. Eventually, the Hebrews took over what is today Palestine, Israel, and they built their Temple of Solomon. Below that, we see the Africans who have been nomads, agriculture developed, and eventually they built the stone monuments such as the Great Zimbabwe. Nomads, we know very little about. They had no writing, They left behind very little other than an oral culture. And anything they built would have been made of grass or animal skin, such as the teepees or the huts that the people lived in when they were nomadic. And so civilizations, that we call them, the great civilizations of the world, needed stone buildings. Gradually, as people started settling down, they domesticated wheat, rice, corn, cassava, and other plants which lent themselves to farming. And then gradually, agriculture developed, people settled in towns, and eventually they started building stone buildings. On the right, that's me in Beijing, which was one of the ancient civilizations with magnificent stone buildings until today. Civilizations emerged in certain areas: Mexico, Peru, the Nile Valley, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley region, and in central China. The first of the ancient civilizations were the Sumerians, 4000 BC, and they all left behind stone monuments, whether it's Machu Picchu in the Andes, or whether it is the pyramids of Mexico and the temples of the Yucatan. Well, with the rise of stone buildings, many other civilizations continued and invented various types of writing, whether it's the cuneiform, a tablet, which we see in the upper left. They started inscribing on the walls of their temples writings in the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. We have the code of laws elaborated by Hammurabi, and money evolved, laws, and we had kings which emerged. So all of the ancient civilizations were marked by stone buildings, writing, priests, royal families, some type of a money system, and laws. So stone buildings are one of the distinguishing characteristics of what we call high civilizations, whether it is Egypt or Greece or Rome in the middle, China or the Yucatan. Stone buildings remain of these ancient civilizations. Well, Stonehenge was one of the oldest of the stone buildings. It is believed that they were built approximately 9,500 before the Common Era, and various other stone monuments were built. These are megalithic civilizations. Now, we know very little about these two sacred buildings. We assume they were sacred because religion played an important part. How they were built was another issue. How they transported the stones long distances. Both of these monuments are rather on flat land. Where did they get these giant rock and how did they transport them? How did they raise them up into the air and place them on top of other upright stones? So throughout Europe, from Spain all the way to Germany and Greece and up into England, even Scotland and Ireland, megalithic stone structures were being built by, most people still assume that they were hunters and gatherers who would gather periodically for some type of political or religious gathering. Well, the Neolithic period is about 4,000 before the Common Era. Neolithic means new stone. We really don't know who built these people, who built these monuments. But as we know, humans evolved in Africa and gradually crossed, going up through Israel, Palestine, the Middle East, and then spreading into India, Northern Europe, and into Western Europe, arriving in Britain around 4000 before the Common Era, but arriving in modern-day Turkey 7000 BC. So that would make it 9,000 years ago. Of course, we know nothing about these people. Their bodies, even if we do find tombs, as we found around Stonehenge, any DNA traces have been long lost. These are some of the stone buildings which are in France and Spain and Germany. Very rudimentary rocks piled one on top of the other to make some type of enclosed space. Now, of course, we always reach the conclusion that they must have been some type of a religious structure. But here again, we don't know because we have found very little material surrounding these megalithic structures. The original people that built places like Stonehenge and Neolithic structures were eventually replaced by a new arriving people. These were the Celts, which are today predominantly in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and Brittany in France. And they either killed off or intermarried with the ancient people who had been there before. The Anglo-Saxons were another big invader that even pushed the Celts out into Wales and Scotland and Ireland. And the Anglo-Saxons, we know, were of a Germanic origin. The Angles and Saxons are today in England, but they have their cousins in Germany, Holland, Belgium, and Denmark. Well, first, Stonehenge is the correct pronunciation. Most people say Stonehenge because we think of a hedge around a house with trees. Henge is a prehistoric monument consisting of a circle of stone or wooden uprights. On the right, we see a recreation of a henge, but it is not a Stonehenge, it is a wooden henge. And many people argue that even Stonehenge was preceded by a wooden structure. And though we can see until today, when we do some archaeological work around Stonehenge, we see the remains of these wooden poles which were buried in the ground, and we see a regular pattern. And so we believe that Stonehenge was preceded by a wooden structure similar to the one we see on the right. Stonehenge is, as you can see from the map on the right, where I have the X, not far from Winchester. It is in southern England, southwest. And so it is within a day's travel from London, but it's always great to visit a place like Winchester on your way there. I took a bus and spent a day there. So it is easily accessible from London. These are some of the pictures of the remains. Some of them, as you can see, have been toppled, but you see the circular aspect with certain structures in the middle. And there is one stone which has been identified, called the altar. Could also be a throne. It's difficult to know since, of course, we have no records. Could have been the throne for a king or a prophet or a religious leader. We really don't know. Archaeologists have discovered that some of the stones were brought as far away as Scotland. You can imagine, without the use of wheeled vehicles or anything, to bring these giant stones down from far distant Scotland would have been quite a challenge. Of course, they probably had tree trunks and rolled them along, but it would have been a long process. And how would you cross a river or go over a hill? So it must have been quite a enterprise for the megalithic people to accumulate these stones. And then the question is, how did they get the upper stones, the horizontal stones, that high? One theory is that they would put the vertical stones in place and then surround them with dirt and make a type of ramp where they could roll up these giant stones, place them on top, and then remove the surrounding soil that had made the ramp. But once again, since unlike the pyramids of Egypt, where we have inscriptions describing every detail of the construction of these temples, even show the craftsmen at work, whereas with Stonehenge and the other megalithic structures, we have no information. The people did not have writing, and it's only legends. And so people have to speculate how these ancient people could possibly have built such a fascinating monument. The Stonehenge, we discovered, is lined up with the summer solstice. And so you see from the picture on the left, we see that the sun, as it is rising, shines in through the stones and it illuminates what we call the altar. And so with a lot of these old megalithic monuments, they're very often arranged with either according to a planet or according to a north-south or east or west axis, or very often according to the cycle of the sun. Now you can see from the pictures that there is a surrounding area with a moat that was dug out, and the interior area must have been reserved for certain important people or certain important events, so that the people who gathered there could actually witness what was going on in the Stonehenge itself. You can see that the area around is and remains farmland. You have the road going beside it, and but there are no buildings around there, which is an inconvenience if you visit the place like I did in July, where it is extremely hot. And you can take a shuttle bus from the tourist greeting center, and it's about a 20-minute walk through the fields down the road, or you can you take a shuttle, or I walked, because you get a little bit of the feeling of the surrounding area. From Stonehenge, you have a straight avenue which was laid out, and you can see the avenue in the picture on the right, see Stonehenge and the avenue, and you can see the traces of it in the picture at the bottom on the left, where you see underneath the yellow arrow, you see an avenue laid out. After that, it curves around, and it goes in a different direction. The circular areas are areas that are excavated tombs or suspected tomb mounds. Here we see some of the burial mounds. And again, you can see that it's farmland and it's very, very flat. And the mounds seem to be scattered everywhere with no specific order to them. Some of them have been excavated, but any bodily remains have been long gone and the bones have deteriorated. And so we get almost no information at this point. However, science will no doubt give more information in the future. So since we know nothing about the area or even who built it, and we have the estimated age, but this type of lost city stimulates all kinds of speculation. And you have all kinds of books claiming to have discovered the story behind Stonehenge. It's the book on the right by Hawkins claims to have decoded what was it about. Or John North's book is a new interpretation and links Stonehenge with the cosmos, with the planets and the sun. The book in the middle by Coleman argues that it was a religious site where the nomadic peoples would come at a particular time, like the summer solstice, and do some type of religious rituals, of which, again, we know absolutely nothing. People like Eric von Däniken, in his Evidence of Gods, argues that it wasn't so much the gods who built the pyramids of Egypt and Machu Picchu and the megalithic structures, and especially Stonehenge, but he argues that they were aliens who came down, taught these early humans how to cut stone, how to transport them, even arguing that the mathematical exactitude, for example, of the pyramids of Egypt and even of Mexico, could only have been done by a highly intelligent race, and that this highly intelligent race were actually aliens. And so when Moses went up into the mountain, Mount Sinai, to get the Ten Commandments, there wasn't a God up there waiting for him, but it was an alien who civilized humans, gave them law codes. Even the Greeks, they believed that fire was a gift of the gods, and that Däniken argues these gods were in fact aliens who were shaping human destiny, teaching us to make fire, teaching us to write laws, to build structures, to institute religions. Well, there is a story that a giant built the Stonehenge, and this goes back to the late 12th century. Book of the Brute by Wace. We can see a copy of it up there in Latin, and it says that a giant came, and a giant named Merlin, who built Stonehenge. Now, this is the oldest known depiction of Stonehenge. The document itself dates from the 12th century. And there you see the ancient people of what is today Britain, watching as Merlin the giant built Stonehenge. So again, this is another theory of who built Stonehenge, as well as the other ancient stone monuments. Now, von Däniken goes even further and saying that he has sufficient evidence to show that it was actually the gods or aliens who came to Earth and taught all these things to humans. In fact, you see the Nazca lines in modern-day Peru carved into the landscape. And he argues that this was a landing site so that when the aliens came in their spaceships, they could land. And so he argued that this was evidence that people from somewhere else came and taught humans how to build these giant monuments, to write, to make laws, taught them mathematics, geometry, and turned basically a bunch of savage semi-ape creatures into the human beings that we know today. Now, this notion that giants or some strange people interacted with humans is also present in the Jewish Bible. In the Hebrew Bible, they talk about the Nephilim and the Giborim, which people, even biblical scholars, don't quite know how to translate them. But in most Hebrew-speaking people would say they were either the heroes or the giants. And we see in Genesis, in Breshit, the son that there came to pass when humans multiplied on earth and had daughters, the sons of God found these women attractive, and so they came down to earth and they mated with the daughters of men and created the first conscious human beings. And so this notion that these ancient monuments were built by someone else, aliens from someplace else, even has a certain background in the Jewish Bible. The Dead Sea Scrolls talk about the giants, sometimes called the Watchers. These are the people who are watching over the progress, the evolution of the human race. The Book of Enoch, which is not in the traditional Christian Bible, but it is in the Ethiopian collection of biblical books. Once again, talking about these strange people. They interacted with humans and really gave rise to what we call today the human race. On the right, we see the statue of Prometheus, the Greek god coming down and giving fire to humans so that they knew how to make fire, which of course gave rise to the first towns, cooking of meat. Much more easy to digest if it is cooked. And the Greek gods, so-called Titans, and all of the people like Atlas, Prometheus, Oceanus, Cronus, many people say that these were actually, and Deniken would argue that they were actually aliens who came down and shepherded the evolution of the primitive ape-like creatures to the current human beings that we have today. Well, aliens aside and gods aside, a number of people in Britain and to an extent Northern Europe, Ireland, and Scotland have been convinced that this ancient monument contains a certain mystical power. The Druids were considered to be the holy people of the ancient Britons before the Anglo-Saxons came, and that they had certain wisdom. And this wisdom can be accessed by going to Stonehenge and performing these sort of reconstituted religious rituals. Tourists are not allowed to walk inside Stonehenge. There's a gate around it with guards. You can walk around it, but not go in. Although the Druids, the Neo-Druids, New Druids, are given a dispensation and they are allowed to go in. They're recognized as a legitimate religious group in Great Britain. And as you can see, the way they're dressed, they go in and perform what they believe were the ancient rituals of the people who built Stonehenge. You see a similar pattern going on in Mexico. When you go to the pyramids of Mexico City, you see a group of people also dressed in white who are claiming that they are rediscovering the ancient wisdom of the people who built this. Now, the Celtic Druids, the Celts, were the first people to occupy what is today Britain. And as I said earlier, when the Anglo-Saxons invaded, they pushed the Celts up into Scotland, Ireland, and Wales. Well, the Neo-Druids believe that the Druids were the priestly caste of the ancient people who built Stonehenge. They were the religious leaders, the legal authorities, the judges, the keeper of history in the oral storytelling tradition. They were the healers, political advisors. Now, of course, all of this is, I don't want to say imaginary, but since there are no written records, and the Anglo-Saxons pretty well wiped out the Celtic culture of around Stonehenge, and maybe some oral legends might remain. But most of this is sort of wishful thinking or a recreation of what some people imagine may have gone on there. We see the same thing happening in Mexico, where people will go there for certain passages of planets and the solstice and claim that these monuments have a certain spiritual power. And a lot of the myths and legends are being either recreated or possibly salvaged from the little bit of oral tradition which remains. Jerusalem is similar. I mean, people go there and imagine that they are once again in direct communication with Jesus and the prophets and Muhammad and aliens and gods. It's called the Jerusalem syndrome. In fact, there's a hospital in Jerusalem for people who are afflicted with this disease, where they imagine that they have managed to communicate with Jesus and were appointed a new prophet or a new Messiah. The Druids are organized. They have their traditions. They have their various lodges in the United States as well as in Northern Europe. They tend to be very Northern European oriented. And you can see the ancient order of Druids with their symbols and their rituals and sort of recreating what they think may have gone on at Stonehenge. The ancient order was established in London in 1771. A branch was established in New York, the Washington Lodge #1 in 1845. And on the right's one of their symbols. So they are sort of like a semi-religious group that consider Stonehenge as their sacred place. various kinds of druids, neo-druids, because, as I said, we have no written records of them. We don't know what they did. Some of them are monotheistic. They believe that there is a god or possibly a goddess. Others are dual theists, meaning that there could have been a god and a goddess that was worshipped there. Others are polytheistic, meaning that the ancient peoples worshipped a host of deities: the sun god, the moon god, the earth god, the god of trees. Others are nature-oriented druids, believing that the hills, the mountains, the rivers, the trees, the plants, and the animals are all part of one giant living organism, of which humans are part of it. But here again, since we have no written records, we have only a few ancient legends, which are dubious worth. So you can almost create any type of religion and gather followers. And of course, holding a ceremony in Stonehenge really attracts people as much as the various theologies. Stonehenge and its revival as a religious site is part of this human search for ancient wisdom. Many people say that the Native Americans had a great secret wisdom. Rabbis go into the Kabbalah and the books of the Jewish Bible and make all kinds of connections and say there is a secret knowledge hidden behind the words, the symbols in the Bible, as well as Stonehenge, the Native American peoples. And so you get all kinds of theories. Stonehenge for the ancestors. Here again, many Britons claim that the original people of Great Britain were the Celts, who built Celts and the prehistoric peoples who were there before the Celts arrived, saying that they are the original Britons, and these Anglo-Saxons and all these other immigrants coming in are diluting the ancient wisdom of the prehistoric peoples of Britain. So many new religions are emerging, when many of them are associated with ancient stone buildings such as Stonehenge. Others are New Age cults. The New Age movement in the 1960s spawned a lot of these movements around these megalithic structures, saying that there is an ancient wisdom. L. Ron Hubbard established his Scientology, once again exploring ancient wisdom. We all know about the Hare Krishna movement, again discovering the ancient wisdom of the Hindus. And these movements, like Scientology and like Hare Krishna, attract a lot of followers, and they have their own organizations, their own websites, their own holidays, and they are very much a part of modern religious landscape. A lot of holidays are celebrated at Stonehenge, and many of them are not associated with Druids. For example, the Great Festival of June 74, which continued for 10 years, attracted all kinds of what we would call hippies, who said when you go inside Stonehenge and you perform your magic or you take your drugs or whatever, you enjoy a total freedom that the modern world has lost. Well, with all the nudism and sex and drugs and everything going on there, on June 1st, 1985, the police decided that enough was enough. So they evacuated Stonehenge, and that was the last of the people's free festivals. Now you can't go inside. There's a barrier around, and only Druids have the authorization to go in for their various holidays, since they are a recognized religion in Great Britain. The summer solstice, you see, the people are allowed in, and this was June 21st, 2022, and you see the sun shining in a certain way between the stones and illuminating the altar stone. And that is another time when tourists are allowed to go in and experience Stonehenge. And you can see how many people are there for the summer solstice. So not everybody is into religion or cults. Many of them just are tourism. So Stonehenge tourism is a big moneymaker. Well, Stonehenge has been adopted by even the Anglo-Saxons and the Celts and everybody else as part of the ancient history of Britain. And as more different people migrated to there, Stonehenge has become a symbol of the ancient culture of Britain before the Celts and before the Anglo-Saxons, and today before the Indians and Africans who are migrating to England and Britain in great numbers, much to the anger of many Brits. But still, it is a symbol of a once golden age of Great Britain. Stonehenge in popular culture, of course, it is the kind of place which not only inspires religions and cults, but it is a great setting for novels, a thriller packed with melodrama, betrayal and lust, The Pillar in the Sky, a Titanic novel of iron heroes and bronze swords, which forged a new world order. Of course, these are novels, but yet they adopt this mysterious character of Stonehenge and build novels around it. Stonehenge Apocalypse, a great book if you have nothing better to do someday, where a group of archaeologists dig up a skeleton near Stonehenge and a piece of machinery is discovered, probably brought by aliens, according to von Däniken. They trigger the mechanism and it ends up ending the world. So here again, another example of this stories that places like Stonehenge can elicit. The Doomstone, again, anthropologist Ant sees a young man and the creature, an intelligent but bloodthirsty humanoid, kills several people. Here again, another way of exploiting the mystery of Stonehenge. Thomas Cole, the New York City painter, incorporated Stonehenge in his painting of America as it was with in the colonial times. And you see the Stonehenge up on the hill. Once again, Stonehenge as a symbol of nature religion, when everything was peaceful. You see the picture on the left, you see the shepherd out in the fields, the small towns with boats. On the bottom left, you see a man drawing geometric patterns in the earth. On the far right, you see a man leaning against a tree playing a flute while two girls dance. This is the type of romanticism which surrounds Stonehenge. Painters have painted it. Once again, vivid colors showing the sun as if Stonehenge itself has in some mystical natural power that just by visiting it and sitting there and seeing the solstice, it can dramatically change you. Well, that was our visit to Stonehenge, and unfortunately, it's rare to get inside, but it is one of those ancient, mysterious stone buildings, stone cities, or ruins that captivate humans. I'm waiting for the Mars rover to discover an ancient lost city on Mars. And once again, people will build stories, legends, imagination, the wisdom of the ancient Martians. Were they the ones who, according to Denigan, gave humans fire, taught them to read and write and build buildings? Does our ancient culture come from Mars? So I can imagine the excitement when we discover the first ruins on Mars or Jupiter, or even the backside of the moon or some other distant planet, how the human mind is going to go crazy trying to explain all of this. So this is Dr. Ronald J. Brown logging off. If you want to contact me, go to ronbrownmedia@gmail.com, and I'd love to chat with you or get some background information about Stonehenge. Okay, thank you for joining me. I shall see you in the future. Bye-bye.